Welcome back, everyone, to the Word Traction podcast. Taking a couple extra days off here and there in August, just because it's August. It's beautiful. The birds are chirping. The dog wants to play, and this fall is going to be pretty busy. So take the time now while you can, if you can, and share your stories of triumph, hangovers, or otherwise. Well, however you get your whatever gets you through the night, as a great man once said. High crimes and misdemeanors. That's tonight's episode title, and it's almost quaint to think about the predicate acts or constitutional requirements, preconditions to impeachment. And we've been down this road before with Donald Trump, and I'm not advocating that we do it again because there's something third time around, fourth time, whatever, who's counting. There's something unsatisfying about it, and that's also kind of part of the plan of doing everything out in the open, right? That it's bold because Donald Trump has been given a free pass. So essentially, the impeachment process has been limited by John Roberts and the Supreme Court because ultimately, a ruffled blue dress in the Clinton administration, Trump's earlier predilections, and other things, Richard Milhouse Nixon, for one, it isn't enough. So I'm always a more vocal advocate for collecting the evidence and attacking on day one after. Still will be, some tough sledding because of the aforementioned traitorous behavior of this U.S. Supreme Court, but we have to play it where it lies. High crimes and misdemeanors. Here, again, a reset, a re a level set, a recalibration of our expectations of how bad things could get from here, depending on the results of the midterm elections and, desperation, rat trapped in a corner, that sort of thing. And all of those concerns are well founded because we've already seen the the president operating with relative impunity. But we're talking here about rape, murder, treason, in quotes, because there's some that's a tough, tall order in and of itself. But the story that got my attention today was we've known what's been going on in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific ever since the Venezuelan operation unfolded. They've continued to murder men, predominantly men. I don't know if there were any women that are victims of the U.S. military in that interdiction effort. I'll argue that it's an extension of the military operation that was Venezuela. Did they declare war? No, but a military operation, just because you don't call it a war, doesn't mean that it'll be treated any differently by the ICC, for instance. Now, does the ICC have jurisdiction to men being murdered in boats by the United States military in international waters? Do they have jurisdiction inside the territorial waters of countries that are signatories to the ICC, right? So that in the northern part of South America, that would include countries like Venezuela, who I can imagine that Rubio and Trump and all are going to continue pressure to have Venezuela withdraw from the ICC for this particular purpose. And also Colombia, both, I think they both were signatories in, I don't know, 2002. It's been a little while. But if the citizens of those countries were killed in a military operation on the, then it may qualify. Will the ICC do it? It's going to be interesting. It was encouraging for the chief prosecutor to to speak out publicly just last week after he was initially fighting the court's decision to remove him from his role because of the alleged improper behavior, from reputable sources documented in numerous times from different witnesses, that he engaged in inappropriate contact with a subordinate, and then that subordinate later put forth evidence that it was tantamount to sexual assault. So that'll all play itself out. He's out. They're going to have to find a new prosecutor. That's not an overnight thing. But we need the ICC to be strong, and we encourage our EU and NATO allies to support the ICC because it's kind of the last line of defense to hold corrupt leaders to account. So it's very important. But that is high crimes and misdemeanors. Murder certainly qualifies. High crimes and misdemeanors. It's an antiquated phrase, and it's down to the it isn't defined specifically with enumerated offenses. It's down to the House and the Senate to decide what are high crimes and misdemeanors and in that whole process. But again, I don't believe Trump will be impeached. I believe that the powers that be will do whatever they can to collect information to frustrate his corrupt behavior and just gather intelligence and and contact our amigos in the individual states attorneys general's office and find out how we can hang some state charges on Trump and his inner circle, including his family. So there's, if it is determined that a war crime was committed on the open seas and there is a tie-in to a member nation with the ICC, they can go down that road. But they also, Trump is going to be issuing so many pardons at the end of the show that it's not useful to project exactly who's going to be pardoned. It's easier to say that everybody in the administration, and then you know, uh, 2 degrees of consanguinity away from that individual is going to have a pardon. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be an administrative nightmare. It's going to be hard for prosecutors later to do anything. But remember that whatever Trump pardons away, that doesn't affect civil charges, right? So if, for instance, a wrongful death suit is brought against, Freedom of Information Act, identify people involved in a particular operation and go after them civilly. You know, it is not as perhaps as satisfying, but we have to balance. We have a lot of work. Just the process of putting back together what's been broken, what's been shattered on purpose, will be a very time-consuming event. We have, reminded again people like this morning, Liz Oyer, Jack Smith, people that are champions for rule of law. Hopefully, we can figure out a way to encourage brave and qualified people, unlike Todd Blanche, to return to the DOJ and put Humpty Dumpty back together again, because it's going to be a long slog. And we have the risks for us going forward is, election cycles of 2 and 4 years, that people say, oh my God, well, I'm going to start down the road to reconstruction of this. It's going to take a decade. And who's to say in 4 or 8 years, another one of these fascist fly-by-night operations isn't going to come back into power and tear everything down. So, but we can't allow that to deter us, because that would be unpatriotic. It's going to be hard. We knew that a year ago. We knew that when it started. Trump did not waste any time. He had a well choreographed, like a football coach who has the first 15 plays well choreographed in a game and tries to score early. That was what Trump did, and he was successful in many ways. He did score. The administrative agencies, all of the things that he did, and the J6 terrorists that were pardoned, and those are people that now are at his beck and call as his private army. And whether they'll be unleashed in somehow in the voting realm, or at some other time, it will be. There are plenty of boys, proud and otherwise, that are going to be happy to be his bitch. Excuse me, to be his instrument when he calls for them, because they feel that they're going to be pardoned and financially will be compensated for anything that they lose in the process. And Trump will learn more here, because the Todd Blanche did or didn't, the absolutely disgraceful behavior of John Cornyn, soon to be former senator from Texas, and Tom with a H, Thom Tillis, soon to be former senator from the great state of North Carolina. They, I have more disgust for them than I do for somebody that just said, I'm with the president. Because they went through this charade. They played this game, directed and produced this drama. And then when Todd Blanche gave them a note that was insufficient to the task for which they said they were holding out for, it made it a joke. It made Cornyn and Tillis into jokes. When Tillis gets up and starts, lecturing somebody about him being a businessman, and I used to do this for business, they are punks. They got punked by Donald Trump and Todd Blanche. And again, if they're, a hardcore MAGA supporter, you know, uh, any of the pricks, the two from Missouri or otherwise, that they stand up and say, I'm with Donald Trump 100%, and he has my vote, and I'm going to vote for Todd Blanche. Fight me. I have much more respect for a person like that than I do for Tillis or Cornyn. And I mean, it's clear why. I mean, if they wanted any if they wanted a larger percentage of the electorate in the United States to think poorly of them, they achieved that. Of course, they're never going to stand for election again. But did they, hopefully, did they? He asked, hopefully, they're going to go out and sell themselves as lobbyists. And when you're applying for a job at a high-powered firm in DC, so oh no, I recognize you from TV. You're the cowardly fuckboy, excuse me, that did that little charade and got Todd Blanche nominated. So no, you can get your little skinny ass out of here, go back to Carolina, whatever. But we're not investing our money in a lobbyist who has absolutely zero integrity. As you know, the old Latin phrase is, "You fucked yourself. Get on with it." Right? So they're worse. They are much worse than the hardcore maggots. So that's it's Todd Blanche. So that is, and that's the rape of Epstein's victims, statutory rape, if you want to be precise. And what Todd Blanche is doing, and that his behavior is reflecting back on Tillis, on Cornyn, and on John Thune, and every other member of the Senate, whether you're in the Judiciary Committee or otherwise. That is reflecting on you because what you're doing is you're voting to appoint an attorney an attorney general who is protecting pedophiles, and in the case of Ghislaine Maxwell, a pedophile herself, who also was responsible for running a prostitution ring and trafficking minors for sex. And that's Todd Blanche is doing that each and every day when he flew down to visit Ghislaine Maxwell and when he moved her, and every day since. And every day he fails to provide the documents in the Epstein files that the court and the Epstein Act required him to put forth. The unredacted files, unless the redactions were to protect the victims. And of course, we found out the only folks that were actually redacted were Donald Trump and his rich billionaire friends, the other people that own professional football teams and the like, international diplomats, former Israeli prime ministers and the like, that were identified by name by these women, Ehud Barak and others, for being the worst of the worst. And when you're saying you're at the bottom of the bucket in a group of sexual predators that exploit minor females, then you're pretty low. And this is on repeat. And we really need to get to the bottom of it because right now, with all of the, we saw this past week is Epstein. It's like a supply demand curve thing. Whenever Epstein buzz is in the ascendancy, then they have to bring out something else to the flashy, the sparkly toy like Tony Fauci. So that whole production was put on for the benefit of their dear leader, but to distract his Trump's base and other voters to say that there's really nothing to see with the Epstein because look at Tony Fauci, the 85-year-old actual MD that spent his entire life dedicated to public health. and the amount of oxygen that people are wasting on TikTok, Twitter, and otherwise, defaming Tony Fauci. It's it's for me, there are certain we're this far down the road in this Trump 2.0. There are certain indicators. There are certain dog whistles for those that are sensitive to the mega authoritarian fascist group. Anytime somebody says TDS or Trump derangement syndrome, anytime some cracker says something about she was a DEI hire, and this is the same thing. Anytime anybody attacks Anthony Fauci, a man who made mistakes, but he was up there in the firing line in a novel disease, making decisions, going against the flow and bloviation of one Donald Trump, the man that was president that caused the entire thing to blow up as it did. And as I have before, I've stipulated that in the end, right just before he left office, the effort that minimum effort, but effort that Trump put forth on the project Warp Speed, he gets one shekel to put in his pocket and an acknowledgement that he did something, one out of 100 things, to be a good human being in that moment. And it was his administration. It wasn't, he alone would not have been bothered because that would interrupt another round of golf. But, high crimes and misdemeanors. So we've got the, unfortunately, if we're just before we put the distasteful study of the rapes aside, we'll just put E. Jean Carroll, that when the Supreme Court refused to reduce that smaller of the two penalties that they're going to rule on, then that was an extra affirmation that the man that is the president of the United States raped E. Jean Carroll. Everybody knew it for a long time, but that is what that finding of culpability only reinforced that fact further. And now she has a chance to the defamation, and I don't know if it's defamation, slander, or libel. What the charging document says in that second part. It'll be a little bit tougher sledding, but it's also a much larger number. So we can just wish she has tremendous success. So with the murder and the rape, light summer subjects. But it's important, again, to reset. We're not talking about misdemeanors. This is not jaywalking. This is not even a minor campaign finance oversight. I didn't really understand the Citizens United, and I didn't realize that I needed to wait an extra 12 hours in order to publish this Hillary documentary 2008, whatever no, that's not what we're talking about here. The third part is it's a little bit more fun because the U.S. taxpayer is getting hurt, but nobody's getting killed or sexually assaulted or exploited. Where Donald Trump, I mean, you could I guess, more colloquially, you could say that the American taxpayer is getting fucked, but that isn't an actual, that's not an indicia of a sexual assault, right? This will be a lot more fun because the way that we attack it, again, not high crimes and misdemeanors and get out of here with that impeachment thing. People, other voices of much more learned voices in the subject of presidential impeachment than myself, and there are many. But I don't think we have the bandwidth. Let's focus on the actual crimes, fixing the shit, and getting them the fuck out. That's my summary. But the Truth Social friends and family account for $100,000 apiece for brokers, and if they use the funds from their own company or institution to pay that fee, and just some wealthy day traders and others, and Trump sycophants that have an extra 100K sitting around because of a making a good bet on nasty Nick Maduro's extraction in Venezuela in Poly Market. You got an extra 100,000 in your pocket. So you get Truth Social Platinum, whatever that is, and you're getting information earlier than the rest of the unfortunate followers on that broken platform. What does that mean to President Trump? If he's sharing it with one for money or all for free, I don't know that his sharing classified information and then somebody using that information to place a stock trade, does that mean that Trump is culpable? Yes, but he has immunity. So that's going to be, that would take until he is long gone, I think, to be successful prosecuting him on a federal charge in that manner. But if one of the subscribers knowingly uses classified or other proprietary information to make trades, does that open up opportunities in other jurisdictions, depending where the account holder is domiciled? If in New York, there are very robust securities laws. This is not the national security part of it, but just on the trading, fraud, inside information. Can we, Letitia James and otherwise, can we hang some charges on even pardoned children of the president and the rest of his circle? Can we, and the institutions that pay for this information as well, the uh, Lutnick's organization, the Cantor Fitzgeralds, any of those, if the check comes from or the funds come from a company account and there's insider trading, do we get to, in a state crime sense, get to bang them up good after Trump's out of office? Because as long as the statute of limitations is more than 2 years, we're good. So I'm hopeful for that, just as I am hopeful when we see the California AG Rob Bonta fighting against the Paramount Warner merger. Those are the people that have the power and that Trump can't reach as effectively. We've seen him withhold funding. It was just this past week we saw all of these instances of Trump withholding grant money in states that voted for Kamala Harris and had two blue senators. That was the criterion for withholding grant money. Also, disaster relief money in much the same way, the same kind of evil, banal calculation in his little brain that I'm going to punish, I'm going to own the libs by making sure that the starving children after a hurricane that are without shelter should suffer because they live in a blue state. with a blue governor that is not on Team Trump. So those are things. Okay. Can we imprison Trump for those decisions? No, that ain't going to happen. But can we use our imagination and attack those people that aided and abetted Trump with his corrupt endeavors? Make a list and check it twice. Can we get enough satisfaction in holding those others accountable? I say yes. So, in any case, that's good enough for today. A beautiful night. Gonna go and see if the dog's doing okay after his dinner. And this was High Crimes and Misdemeanors on the Word Traction Podcast Network. And we'll be with you folks sometime tomorrow. Again, a few dark days in the month of August, because I'm also trying to put together the business AI feed separate programming on this platform as well, which takes like actual work. So I'm going to take a few extra days to do that. And thank you, and be kind enough to restack, subscribe, retweet, share, and share on another network if you would be so kind. And enjoy your evening. And again, tonight we'll probably learn something a little bit more about. Remember that that candidate Al Sayed is not a member of the DSA, but we can think of him in a way as in coalition with the DSA because some of the same principles apply. I'll let him explain. I mean, he has adequately. He's very well spoken. He's an actual effing MD, unlike RFK Jr. And anybody else in the administration, almost everybody in the administration. And all he wants is for everybody to have good medical care, and he doesn't want APAC to be able to control elections. And I listened, as I do, I listen to podcasts like, a U.S. podcast, but Israel focus. Call me back. You know, Dan Senor, intelligent, well-spoken man. Certainly more on the conservative side. Certainly, he struggles to ever be critical of Bibi Netanyahu, so that loses me there. But it's still a source of people that are conscious of Israel's place in the world, and more importantly to me, people in the diaspora. Many times, too many times, there are guests that are making excuses for Netanyahu, and they do that little kabuki dance where they're all anti-Semite. Section part 2 of the episode. Well, many of the people that are against Bibi Netanyahu also support radical Islam. And they kind of march back because the one thing that nobody who, graduated from elementary school can reasonably argue that if you say anybody that's opposed to Bibi Netanyahu is an anti-Semite, then you're a fucking idiot and nobody will take you seriously. Because saying that is like saying I am a stupid, silly person. Right? That just it's a tell. It's kind of like that the MAGA tell, red pill, Trump derangement syndrome, DEI hire, and all that. That is a tell. in the poker sense. So if you signal that people, anyone that is critical of a man that has supervised genocide, actual genocide, war crimes, if you're saying that being opposed to him is anti-Semitism, you don't know what the word means, and you're still breathing, you're still alive. So learn a little bit. I mean, study socialism, communism, fascism, and then look at anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. They're important words and they have specific meanings. And it would be helpful if you ever accuse people of being anti Semitic to actually know what the fucking word means. Just a pro tip. So back to you. Have a beautiful night. Thank you. And we'll catch you sometime tomorrow. Thanks very much.